Thank you, Victoria, and thank you so much for joining us today. And first of all, I want to say a little bit about Great Lakes Center for Youth Development. For those of you that may not be familiar with us, our vision at GLCYD is a youth environment throughout the UP where every young person has an opportunity to thrive. And the way we do that is by promoting positive youth development, such as today, and then also by strengthening nonprofits. And we strengthen nonprofits because we feel nonprofits are the social fabric for our communities, and they help really strengthen communities and provide great opportunities for youth. However, what we're talking about today pertains to our whole community, not just the nonprofit industry. The biggest survey that we do, we've done it every 2 years, it is called Profiles of Student Life, Attitudes, and Behaviors. This is from the Search Institute out of Minneapolis, and they are really the experts, I guess you could say, in research around youth development and family relationships and what youth need to succeed. So, and like Victoria said, it's not a typo. We do the survey every fall, and we really work hard to conduct it before hunting season because, interestingly enough, if we do it afterwards, it kind of skews our data, especially around alcohol use. But this is our 8th time surveying youth in 8th, 10th, and 12th grades in Marquette and Alger counties. It has 160 questions to it, and the Search Institute puts a lot of, like I said, research into it, but also they work as hard as they can to have data quality and anonymity so that youth can be hopefully as truthful as and not feel like someone else would find out what they are reporting. So what we're talking about today and what we call asset survey, or what the Search Institute's Profiles of Student Life measures, is what we call developmental assets. And as adults, we think of assets as such as financial or our net worth or a home, versus developmental assets are things such as a caring neighborhood, high expectations, safety, integrity. They really are protective factors. And research shows that the more developmental assets kids have, the more likely they are to grow up healthy and competent, caring, and just a general good member of society that we all want in our communities. And all kids need them because this is a framework and a community language that we can use to promote the positive development of all children and adolescents. So why are developmental assets so important? And we will get into the list of assets and the survey results, but to me, this slide really talks about why it's so important, because this slide shows thriving indicators. And if you look at the red bars are youth that have the most assets. They have between 31 and 40 assets, or orange or red. The dark blue have 0 to 10 assets, or they are the youth with the least amount of developmental assets. And you can really see the trend between those youth in the dark blue that really do not have very many developmental assets. They're not experiencing a good environment, to those that do have a lot of assets, and how much of a difference it makes between the two of kind of, I guess you could say, the haves and the have-nots as far as the environment that they're in and the number of developmental assets that they have. On the flip side, this is what we call high-risk indicators, and this is only 3 of the high risk, but it really shows, again, the pattern that, again, the orange or red bars towards the right side are the youth with the most developmental assets, and the dark blue bars on the left are the youth with the least amount of assets. So you can see how violence, school truancy, and depression all greatly decrease the more assets youth have. So that's why this is so important, and anyone can be an asset builder. And just as an example, think about when you were 15. When you were in high school, what was it like? I remember at times being very frustrated. I remember at times not being able to get my locker open, and things like that were it would put me over the top some of the time. And maybe I felt a little lost. But then you have someone that comes along and says, it's okay, I can help you. And for me, it was a couple of teachers that really took me under their wing and said, it's okay, you don't have to be so stressed out. I had a band teacher that really helped develop my talents and helped me understand how creative activities can be an outlet for my anger, because those of you that know me, I have red hair and I have a redheaded temper, and it really made a difference in my life. So think about when you were 15, was there an adult or more than one adult other than your parents that helped you along the way? These people were building developmental assets in you. So let's talk more about assets. The assets are broken down into two key categories, external and internal. And here is a list of what I consider the buckets, so to speak, of the external and the internal assets. Now, external assets are positive experiences that surround youth with support, with personal boundaries, with the expectations and opportunities for empowerment and constructive use of time. When various systems in the community deliberately provide these critical experiences, then positive development is stimulated and nurtured. So the external are ones that as a community we can really embrace and help develop in our youth. And then the internal are elements such as the educational commitments of the young person, having strong positive values, social competencies, health, and positive identity. So similar to the external assets, internal assets develop through consistent, deliberate community efforts. It just is in a different way and transferred to youth, or help develop to youth in a different way. So if we look at there, here is a list. I realize some of you may not have all of the report that lists all 40 assets, and I'm not sure how many of you are familiar, so I will go through this very quickly. But support is one of our external assets, and what this slide shows is each of the assets, so asset numbers 1 through 6, all relate to support, which is an external asset. And then we have empowerment, community values youth, youth as resources, service to others, and safety all relate to empowerment, and that's also an external asset. We have boundaries and expectations. And notice it puts in there neighborhood boundaries and adult role models. So many times we think it's either the school's job or the parents' job to really develop these youth, but in essence, it's actually all of our jobs. And constructive use of time. This is an area where anyone can really help build assets. Invite a young person that you may know along for a fishing trip, or if you have a hobby that you want to teach them, or just strike up a conversation and greet them. Constructive use of time, and then commitment to learning. Now, commitment to learning is when we're going into the what's called internal assets. So, and kind of makes sense when you think about achievement, motivation, school engagement, reading for pleasure. Do they do their homework? Do they care about their school? And having positive values. These are the assets related to positive values that are also developed internally. Social competencies. planning and decision making. Here's something, give a young person the opportunity to plan, even plan a family meal or plan a volunteer activity, and then you're looking at an external asset and internal asset building. Youth that can show resistance, that they don't cave into peer pressure, negative peer pressure, and they can understand when a situation may be dangerous. One thing that we do at Great Lakes Center for Youth Development to model developmental asset building is we have 4 seats on our board dedicated to youth, and they have to be 16 years or older so that they can be full-fledged voting youth, voting members of our board. We give them orientations, we solicit them for gifts. We really treat them just like the quote-unquote adults on our board, and they also, when it comes to some of the youth components in our programming, they plan those for their peers. And it's wonderful, a wonderful experience working with these youth board members. Back to internal assets, positive identity is the last bucket for internal assets. So hopefully this gives you kind of an idea and helps you start thinking about developmental assets and what it means when we talk about assets and we talk about this report. So our overall survey results, we have 48% of our youth that have more than half of the assets, and we have 12% that have 0 to 10 assets. So you can kind of see how the pie is divided. This year, for the first time since 1997, we hit an average across the board of all assets with all youth of 20. And so that was kind of exciting because, one, we see an upward trend, and that's something that we, definitely want to see. One thing we always like to report on is the most common assets and the least common assets. And it's interesting to note that the most common assets, all of the ones in black, are internal assets, and the one in blue is external. So out of all the common assets, the internal ones are the most common versus only one external. Positive peer influence is actually new to the most common list this year, so that we were excited to see that and to see, just positive peer influence increasing. On this flip side, with the least common assets, again, the ones all in blue are external assets, and the reading for pleasure is an internal asset. And creative activities has been the least common asset for every survey that we've done since 1997, unfortunately. So there again, if you have a hobby, invite a young person along and maybe they can get involved in more creative activities. So the good news about this is that we as a community can influence external assets. In my opinion, we can influence them easier than the internal. And so being able to look at positive family communication. Those of you that work with youth, do you try to equip them to have a meal with their family or to have discussion starters? Do you, as an individual or within any clubs that you're a part of, do you use youth as resources? Do you ask their opinion on things that may impact them? Do you have them help you plan events for them and their peers? And in general, showing as a community that we do value youth. We want to ask their input and use them and the decision-making capabilities that they do have at this point in their lives. Another great thing that we're seeing is the high-risk behaviors in a downward trend. And these lines are talking about drinking or driving and drinking or riding and drinking, and also smoking or tobacco use. And so seeing the overall pattern decreasing is a good thing. Note that the scale only goes to 40%, so if it was a 100% scale, obviously the decline wouldn't look so steep, but it is a decline nonetheless. The other survey that we do in conjunction with the Search Institute's survey is locally, Great Lakes Center for Youth Development, in conjunction with local partners such as the Health Department and NMU, we developed the Sidebar Survey. And this year it contained 44 questions, and we really look at information that's difficult to obtain at a local level anywhere else. And this information, really all of this information, is useful for grant writing. For example, internet use and safety. We're really seeing increases in internet use, and that's no surprise. And 93% of students using social networks. I remember 8 years ago, we never even asked about social networking. Or I think, let's see, in 2012, we asked about MySpace. I mean, who's even thought of MySpace in the last few years? But that just shows how quickly technology is changing, and that these youth are really engaged with technology. Another issue, because technology is so prevalent with our young people, is cyberbullying. And so the question was asked, in the past year, have you seen a post or received a message online or via text messaging from a peer that was meant to threaten, embarrass, or harass you? And 21%, obviously we don't want any of our youth to be bullied, but in 2012, that number was slightly higher. It was 22% total answered yes, or I'm sorry, 23%, and which was 18% of males reported yes and 28% of females reported yes. So the small trend going down is something that we like to see. Here's a breakdown of internet use and safety by the type of phone that a young person has. And so if you look at it, 87% of youth use text messaging, and 90% have some type of cell phone. And so getting in touch with young people these days, getting in touch with them is very easy. Having meaningful connections can be difficult because, again, they're accustomed to communicating via text messaging. We also look at prescription drug abuse. Using prescription drugs had been a real hot topic a few years ago. I think it's starting to decline somewhat. We've not seen much change in the last 2 survey years. However, the never used prescription drugs to get high was 86% in 2012, so it's a slight increase. And the fact that 4% have done it more than 10 times, that is alarming in the past year. However, I also think what society was looking at, and when Oprah Winfrey had her show and she did a big thing about prescription drug parties and different things, we're not really seeing it here as much as the mainstream media may have described, but it is something that we want to pay attention to. And if you have prescription drugs in your home, take measures to keep them safe. Now, this is something that I found very interesting this year, and we always ask the question, how wrong how wrong do you think it is for you and your peers to use marijuana, alcohol, cigarettes? And then they answer wrong, very wrong, neutral, not wrong, or there's nothing wrong with it, that type of thing. And if you look at this grid, alcohol and cigarettes are on a slow, steady trend, for the most part, slow increase in that it's wrong or very wrong to use alcohol and cigarettes. However, marijuana is decreasing. So more youth are thinking that it's wrong to use cigarettes and alcohol than marijuana. And I also put on here the line for when medical marijuana was legalized in Michigan. So what this tells me is that youth do pay attention to the society around them, and that they are aware of what's going on, and that policy can impact their thinking around safety and issues of alcohol versus marijuana versus cigarettes. Really, what do you do with all this data, and how do you take this all in and do something with it? The biggest thing is to be intentional. To have the biggest impact, we need to keep doing it intentionally and consistently. You know, it could be easy to say, like I said, it's the school's issue, or I'm not a parent, it doesn't pertain to me, or just let it happen naturally. But when you put effort into it, it has a much greater impact, whether it's in the life of an individual kid or a group of youth or the entire community. Every single one of us can be an asset builder. And the neat thing about assets is when you're building, and when you're focusing on trying to build one developmental asset, usually you're always building others as well, because it's almost like an intertwined spider web, if you will. If you start to pick up, if you rise one piece, then all of them start to rise as well. So, and that's what research shows as well, is that the key words that I see throughout the Search Institute's website and their research findings are relationships, providing youth with opportunities, and consistency. And consistency in the relationships, consistency in boundaries, and consistency being intentional in your relationships with them. So I ask you, and I'd like you to think about, you know, maybe think about some of the assets that were a concern to you. Think of some of the assets when I was going through the list or giving examples that really caught your attention. You know, where can you as an individual have the biggest impact? And then where might your circle have the biggest impact? Maybe you have a book club, and you could invite youth to the book club and get their perspective. You could see if there is a local youth book club, and kind of compare what you're reading and have a discussion. I had a phone call this morning from a nonprofit that that is a creative activity type of nonprofit, and he said, we would like to get youth more involved in what we're doing. So that was a fabulous voicemail to walk into the office to after he had read the articles in the Mining Journal. So where can those of you that, you know, your hobbies, your circles, your civic clubs, your faith-based communities, where might you have the biggest impact? And then where can our community have the biggest impact? And I'm really, really interested in your ideas here, and you can put them in the chat box. And if you have any questions, please feel free to put those in the chat box, because at GLCYD, we're really trying to work at a community level in both of the counties of where can we have the biggest impact? How can we coordinate resources and organizations to connect them with youth to have a systematic impact for our young people, so that, as I mentioned, our vision is that all youth have the opportunity to thrive. And with that, I will open it up for questions. I know I threw a lot of information at you in a short amount of time, so feel free to ask questions. Victoria will monitor the chat box, so you can feel free to type your message in the chat box. Let us know if you have any questions. While you're thinking of your questions, I would just like to say, again, thank you for tuning in and for your interest in helping us promote positive youth development. And we have many, many of these very nice looking community reports that Victoria and her colleagues developed. We would love to get those into your hands and anywhere else you may want. We would also be very open for doing a presentation at any of the clubs you may be involved with, or like I said, faith-based groups, absolutely give us a call and we would love to share this information.
All right, and we have one question, and it's my favorite question. It's, is there a chance I can get a copy of the slides? And I will do you one better, Jenna. We actually recorded today's webinar, and I'll be sending out a link to the YouTube, so you'll be able to not only watch the beginning and see all the slides. The follow-up email will have the YouTube link, a link to the report, which is on our website, www.glcyd.org. So if you aren't able to make it into our office, you can print your own copy, and it will have a PDF version of the slides.
Thank you for that question. I also want to say those of you that are online that work with youth, the Search Institute has an amazing amount of resources. And we at GLCYD also have a lot of resources that we've purchased from the Search Institute. So if you're looking for something in particular, or if you even have a question like, how can I XYZ with my youth programs, please give us a call and we can save you time by either looking to search or calling our contacts at Search Institute, or we may already have a resource in-house that could help you in promoting positive youth development even more throughout the programs that you already do.
It doesn't look like we have any more questions at this time.
Okay, and I never want to cut people off that may be in the middle of a question because I tend to be a slow typer and I don't want to just cut anyone off. If you have a question, you can continue to put it in the chat box or in the question box, or you can raise your hand so that we know you're writing a question. That way we won't cut anyone off prematurely.
We do got a lot of feedback that people are enjoying this, which is awesome. This is our first time releasing the data in a webinar form. We used to do actual kind of like release parties, but it can be difficult to get off work and get somewhere to learn about this. So this is our first time doing the webinar to share the data with you guys. So I really appreciate the great feedback that we're getting. And if you have any thoughts about things that you'd like to see in the webinar presentation for next time, let me know and we'll definitely add them.
Thank you again for attending. I can't say it enough. You all are such great partners with us, and please let us know how we can help you in the future, help you help our youth. So thank you and have a great day.